Hi, this is Simone at Network. Thanks for joining us. We're just waiting for a few more people to hop on. We'll be starting in about, no more than 5 minutes. So just hang tight. We'll be right with you. Hi, this is Simone at Network. Just hang tight for another minute. We've got folks that are still jumping on the line, so hold on just a moment.
All right, good afternoon, my friends. This is Meg Olson. I'm our grassroots coordinator here at Network. This webinar today, of course, our time together is going to be really different than we imagined last week and even yesterday. And today, as we were reflecting as a staff, we realized that you all, like us, probably need some time to be in community with Network. So you will hear from Sister Simone, and she'll talk about the election results, and Sister Marge Clark will talk some about lame duck session. But you're also going to hear reflections from other members of our staff. Laura Munoz, who, yes, one of our government relations associates, Mackenzie Harris, our communications associate, and then Laura Peralta Schulte, one of our senior government relations advocates. So we just want you to take a few moments and close your eyes and take a few breaths just to get ourselves centered after this day that's been pretty difficult for all of us, I imagine. Just to let you know, we have some people from our communications team are live tweeting this webinar. And so you'll see below our photos, you see our Twitter handles. If you are on Twitter, we invite you to join us. And we have the two hashtags that you'll see across the bottom there, Network Webinar and hashtag Election 2016. You can certainly follow or tweet at Sister Simone, and follow and tweet Marge, Sister Marge, or me. And then also our reflectors, Laura Munoz, Mackenzie Romero-Harris, and on the bus, Laura. So we will first begin with Sister Simone.
Thanks, Meg. My hunch is that most of you on this call had a long night last night and have been facing a challenging day. I know I've heard from many about the worries and concerns. One of the first people that I talked to this morning was a reporter from France for the French Catholic newspaper in France, who was devoting 10 pages to what happened in this election. They're quite nervous in France because they have an election coming up, and they wonder if this portends something for them. I think as we reflect on it, the part that was really kind of broke my heart was the fact that white Catholics, men and women, voted in such high numbers for Mr. Trump, and that this election broke so clearly along racial and racial lines, as well as around the issues of immigration reform, economic realities. These are all the issues that we work on here at Network, but what had struck me was how polarized we really are, not only in the politics, but actually in our geography. When you look at the map of where the blue states or the red states, it's very divided. But even more than that, we each took different states to study what had happened in the Senate and House races. And what I noticed in my states were that many House members won by 60, 70% of the vote, which says that gerrymandering has really divided us, and we don't have to talk to each other because we are separate. We're separate in our political places. And what I think this challenges us at Network to do is to do something that we did on the bus this summer, but we did a little bit of. And many of you remember we went to the Republican convention and we tried to engage in conversation and dialogue. And hard as it is, I really think that that may be one of our key lessons, is that we need to listen deeply and engage in conversation just to understand where people are coming from. We see the world differently, and we need to understand the different views. And one of the things that I got thinking about as we were reflecting on it this morning is that You know, everyone feels angry about being left out. The folks who voted for Trump so often cited their anger at being left out of the economy. Folks who, African American folks, talked about being left out of Mr. Trump's basic human concern. Immigration, the same thing. The LGBTQ community talked about how they feel pushed out and denigrated by him during this campaign season. It's really hard to face all this division when all of us, feel pushed out. So one of the things I'm thinking is that we at Network, and following the call of Pope Francis to bridge the divides, is when everybody's feeling so far on the edge, we've got to find ways to step towards each other, to step towards the center, to engage in real conversation. And so our headline coming out of this painful day, painful night actually, where hardly any of us have had any sleep, is that the politics of division won the day, but they cannot rule our hearts. We're better than that, both as a nation and as an organization. So with that little bit of, I don't know, encouragement, or trying to find how we weave our community together so that we can sustain this challenging time. I have to say that my prayer for Mr. Trump is that he will be more like his self in his acceptance speech and less like his candidate self. He seems fairly like a chameleon where he can change colors to fit the circumstances. So maybe, let us pray to the Lord, he might fit these circumstances and work and really put into practice what he was talking about, being for all of us. And in the meantime, we have our work cut out, because we the people have got to stay involved. We will fail if we're not. And so at the end of our call, we're going to talk about some of the ever-continuing challenging work that we have. But I'm grateful that you're on the call. I'm grateful that we're here together. You give me hope and you keep us going. So with that, let me turn it back to Meg. Thank you for this chance to talk together.
Thanks, Simone. Just want to remind everyone that we will be taking questions towards the end of this webinar, and you can either type them in on your control panel or you can tweet them with the hashtag #NetworkWebinar, right? Okay, so we will have our comms team looking on Twitter if you want to ask questions that way as well, if that works for you. All right, so we're going to be moving on to our 3 reflections. These are all our staff, Laura Munoz, Mackenzie Harris, and Laura Peralta-Schulte. So, Laura Munoz, thank you.
Thank you, Meg, and hi to everyone on the call. Like Meg said, my name is Laura Munoz. I am one of the Government Relations Associates here at Network. A little bit about me before I dive into why this has directly impacted my life this election. I recently graduated from a small private Catholic university in May of this year, right at the outskirts of Chicago, and then before that I was raised in South Carolina. And the reason why this election result has really directly affected me and my family is because I am undocumented. I am a DACA recipient, and it's been hard to be a part of a community that from the very beginning of the Trump campaign has been very criticized and spoken about in a very negative way. And I am lucky enough to be one of the few million undocumented individuals to have DACA, to have some sort of protection from deportation, but I can't say that about my family members. And I have been in the United States for almost 20 years, since coming from Colombia in 1997, and I have never, ever been as scared for my family's safety as I am today. It's hard because my family looks to me for direction and for advice and guidance, and my friends and colleagues, and I don't know what to say at this moment because there's just so much uncertainty, especially for my family who's still in South Carolina. But I will say that although there is this much uncertainty, what we are certain about is that here at Network, we will continue to work on access to citizenship because we are still a nation of immigrants, no matter who is in the Oval. And those values that we have as a faith-based organization and just as human beings are going to be reflected in the work that we do. And so as an undocumented government relations associate here in Washington, D.C. and at Network, I'm going to continue to work for the immigrant community, for the rights that we so desperately deserve and need, and for the safety of this community. And I hope that you will too.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks so much for sharing. Mackenzie. Hi, everyone that's on the call. My name is Mackenzie Harris. I'm the Communications Associate for Network. Just a little bit about me. I graduated from a small Catholic institution from right outside of Philadelphia, Cabrini University. I'm very proud to be that was my alma mater, but I am originally from a very small town outside of Westchester, Pennsylvania, and today my heart is completely and utterly broken. I am the oldest of 5, and today I've just been weeping for the futures of them and for every American child. I fear for the lives of those who are struggling on the margins of society. And in college, I had the opportunity to meet 2 of my best friends who are Muslim and practice that faith. I've had the pleasure of being able to attend their rich traditions and religious traditions. And I had to text them this morning telling them to be safe and to look out and that I love them because we live in an America that reminds us how prevalent misogyny and white supremacy truly is. Perhaps this malfunction in the voting process will inspire us to fix our polarizing electoral system. And I just encourage you all to break your hearts open because history is never done being written. Thanks, Mackenzie. And then Laura, Pearl Social Team.
Yeah, hi. Good to chat with you today. I am really coming to speak to you today as a white woman and as a mother of 2 girls. So in terms of just looking at the vote tallies today, it is clear, as Simone said, that, the difference in the election was that people that look like me, that have my background, supported the votes to put Trump over the top. I'm white, I'm a woman, I'm educated, I'm Catholic, I live in a suburb, I'm married, and so I definitely feel like this election calls me to look into the mirror and to look at the community that I live in and really, reflect what is a very ugly history and a living history, which is how do communities that I live in, how do people that look like me talk about race, deal with race. The fact that we had a candidate that was so blatantly racist, mocked people with disabilities, was engaged in sexual assault, and for the majority of people that are college educated and white to be the base for this man tells me that we have a very broken system. And so my challenge is really the challenge of complicity, and how do we truly engage in a conversation about justice with our families and in our communities, recognizing that those can be some of the hardest conversations that exist. I was just back at home last week when there was a conversation about a kid on a football field kneeling down in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter. And the conversation was about how bad this was and disrespectful this was for police. And rather than speaking up, you know, I chose to remain silent. I am complicit. But it was fear, and what I did the next day is reached out to my family to say I committed a sin of omission and I really need to come clean and have that conversation, which turns out it was a fine conversation. But it was my fear that was keeping me back. And so my prayer, along with Simone's prayer, is that I can summon up the courage in myself to have these conversations, particularly with people that do not agree with me. That is the challenge. So I put it to maybe all of us here. Thanksgiving's coming right up around the corner. Maybe the most faithful thing we can all be doing is having a real conversation at the Thanksgiving table this year.
All right. Thank you so much to our staff for sharing so vulnerably this afternoon. I'm going to hand it over to Sister March to talk about our lame duck system, because we are, of course, still going to the Hill in November and beyond. And so, March, would you talk to us about our work?
Thank you. I think it's difficult to think about our work at this time that is really tearing all of our hearts apart. But our work really is about what is going to help people be able to survive. The slide that you're seeing up there is just a reminder of our 2020 vision for mending the wealth gap, the access gap, and some of that in particular is what we need to be working on in this lame duck session. The lame duck session is going to be fairly short, and there are many competing priorities. There's a whole lot that they did not get done during this entire year, and a lot of it needs to get done. Some things are must-do, and some are could-do, and the time is very short. Competing priorities, the must-do, the biggest must-do, is funding the budget, and that has to happen. It's due December 9th. What they could do are things that many of us care greatly about. One is the funding for Flint and the water processes there and for the flood relief around the country. Another is the Medical Cures Act that people are working on to be able to give people greater access to medical care. And then also the possibility of a tax bill that could help with some of the taxes like EITC. The time is limited, as I said. There's 16 days in this session in which they have to try to do a whole year's worth of work. And the Republicans right now are emboldened, and they're looking to not do a lot of these things until the 115th Congress. They don't see any need to rush in them, but we do need to think about what has to be done. They come back for their lame duck session on Monday, the 14th. For a couple of days, the Republicans are going to be doing leadership elections. That means the election of the Speaker of the House and of some of the key committee chairs. Then the staff who've been working throughout this time that the legislators have been gone are committed to getting the funding bills ready and to the members of Congress by the 5th of December so that they can meet the current deadline to pass the spending bills by December 9th. That's when the current funding runs out. And then we're kind of in a holding position until January 3rd when the official 115th Congress begins. And on the 20th of January, we deal with the inauguration of the 45th President. the lame duck priorities within the funding, the lame duck priorities that we have to do with housing, with the census, and with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. On budget funding, Paul Ryan is going to be in a position to make a choice. He can choose to do what's called a continuing resolution, which would hold the funding levels at what they currently are. This would be particularly bad for human needs, and I'll talk a little bit about one of those in a minute. The other thing that could be chosen is an omnibus, which is a bill that would pull together all of the remaining funding bills. And what happens often in that process is that human needs funding gets increased. And that's really important for us, because if it's the same as 2016 funding, there will be a lot of gaps that won't be met. In housing, the biggest problem is with extremely low income folks. Right now there exist 31 units for every 100 units of extremely low income housing that is needed. And that's an atrocious thing to think about. So the choices, or what they'll be needing to work with, is doing some kind of housing assistance, increasing vouchers, making more housing available in one way or another, or we're going to see a whole lot more homelessness. And right now, a lot of the homelessness we're seeing is family homelessness, which is not necessarily on the streets, but it's people bunked in 4 or 5 families in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. And we don't really need to have more of that. It's too destabilizing for children. So if we don't increase the housing funds, there will be fewer housing vouchers available, and building upkeep would again be delayed. Right now we've been losing about 10,000 units of public housing every year because they can't keep up with maintenance, and so they're becoming inhabitable. So those are some serious housing problems. The next one is the 2020 census. The chart that's up there, if you look at it, shows that in 2010 there was quite a lot more money in the budget for the census than there has been since then. That makes sense. Right before and during and right after the census, they need to have a lot of work being done. And then they have some slack years, but now as we're getting close to the 2020 census, and there are some things that have to happen. They need to be able to increase the funding. There's some research that needs to be done. There are some new policies that need to be set. And one of the issue areas is with Native Americans, and they're being underrepresented in the census, and several other groups are undercounted. And when marginalized groups are undercounted, they get less federal funding, and they have less political representation. That feeds into the gerrymandering that's done in voting areas and all kinds of funding areas. So policymakers need accurate counts in order to better respond to the needs of the American people. And we know that in a democracy, in our democracy, every person counts. The last funding issue that we're particularly concerned about is the Office of Refugee Resettlement, sometimes referred to as ORR. We're facing the worst displacement crisis in recorded history. This includes children coming up from Central America. It includes people coming over from various parts of Africa. It's a lot of people who need to be resettled. It's Middle Easterners who need to be resettled. And resettlement is one of the key ways that we can lead by example and encourage other countries to help refugees. President Obama committed to resettling 110,000 refugees in 2017. Now, in 2016, only 75,000 were planned and were funded. And if they stay with the 2016 funding levels, then there will be no money to cover more than the 75,000, even though we've made a commitment to 110,000. So that's a serious, serious problem. The future of refugee resettlement is very uncertain with a Trump presidency. So those are the things that we're most concerned about in terms of funding the government for the rest of 2017.
All right. Thanks, Marge, so much. I just wanted to say, before we shift over to questions, as one of the grassroots mobilization coordinators here at Network, I cannot emphasize enough how much we are going to need you, our members, and our activists in this upcoming year. My colleagues can tell you that I've been crying most of the day, and it hurts so much. But I realized that after I weep today, probably for the next few days, I have to reroute myself in hope and in love and invite everyone to join us in our work. And whether that's through advocate teams, which we have several in Indiana and Michigan, and members in South Carolina who've been working together, and Virginia, or even if we can talk more if you're interested in building together a community to work on these issues together in 2017 and beyond. But community will definitely be key. I've heard a lot traveling with Simone this election season that hope is a communal virtue, and we'll definitely need this as we're moving into in-district meetings or coming to the Hill in the upcoming years. So thank you. So I guess now we're moving into some time for questions. I think I have a couple about lame duck, so I think I'll ask those for Marge. These are for Marge. So will the Trump transition affect lame duck decisions?
Indirectly, not directly, as he would not be in office yet, but certainly he's emboldening the Republicans who have their own view of what to do with budgeting and what to do during the lame duck, and which things to actually do, because there are a number of things that could be done during lame duck, and they may well choose not to do that because they feel freer to put things off till next year or just forget about them totally.
Okay. What about TANF and SNAP funding?
Our understanding is that TANF is probably not going to have anything done, certainly not in the lame duck, but even next year, that probably the most likely would be that it would be just continued at current processing, that it probably will not get any improvements. SNAP is not up for anything until the Farm Bill comes up, but I think we've got a lot of questions about what will happen with that. I don't think I have an answer on that.
All right, thank you. So, okay, oops, is this another one for Marge? All right. How do we make the appeal to Republicans to act before the next Congress and President are sworn in? Do they have any motivation to work on these issues in the lame duck session?
I think one of the things to do is to contact your Congress people and tell them stories of people you know who are hurting, people you know who are struggling with housing, people you know who are struggling with food issues, people who are struggling with child care issues, with transportation issues, and remind them that unless they do an omnibus, then that funding is going to stay at old levels, which will be $1 billion or more below what it absolutely needs to be.
Okay. Another question about lame duck and a little bit about 2017. So are there things the current Republican Congress would want to get done before the 150th Congress?
Yes. They would dearly love to have more defense spending. And the only good thing about that is if they get more defense spending, the White House certainly and the Democratic members of Congress will be holding them to what's called parity, which means that if they increase the military spending, they must also increase the non-defense spending. So that would be one possibility. That is something they dearly want.
Okay. And we have a listener here who's participant today who's concerned about the legislative bills to overturn the regulations of the payday lending. Could that be an issue this lame duck session? Laura or Marge?
I'm working with a group that is working on having none of those kinds of things added to bills. We were very successful in that last year, and we didn't have any riders put in, and that's what that would be. There are bills that have been proposed as riders that would do exactly that. We have assurances from the White House that they will not sign a bill that has those in it. Now, if they can truly hold strong on that, that should be safe. But I think it will come up in 17 if it doesn't happen in the lame duck. And can I, this is Simone, and if I could just add a consequence of this election. One of it, I mean, we're used to focusing on the Hill and with the administration. But one of the things that a significant power of the president is how the president staffs and implements the various departments of the government. And I think at this point that's really unclear what Mr. Trump's policy positions are. And on the Center for, what is it, CFPP? The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It took me a while to get the acronyms. But that is loved by Democrats and detested by Republicans because it undercuts profits for a bunch of the lenders in our society. And so it becomes a question, what will Mr. Trump do? So it could be fully funded, but never implemented. So we have a much more complex landscape to work with, and it won't be, I mean, I hate to say this, but the last 8 years have been relatively simple by comparison, and there's a lot of ways in which we don't have a clue as to how this is going to play out. Yes. Can I add one thing about the CFPB, and that is that the Republicans are really intent on changing the structure of that and putting it under appropriations, which would be annual funding, and taking away probably 90% of its power. Right. So we have a lot to keep our eyes on. But let's not get focused too quickly on the wonkishness of policy, because my concern is that we would hide in our capacity to be active and miss the deeper opportunity that we have to go deeper, be in a contemplative space, hold on to the complex truth, and to move forward. So are there any other questions that we want to engage at this point?
Well, we do have more questions about policy, but I would just like to, we have not chosen a date yet, but we are going to have in January, fairly early on, maybe the second week of January, a 2017 policy plan where I'm sure we will talk about the Farm Bill. We'll definitely be talking about immigration and addressing the concern about deportations. And I can tell you that most every member here, or staff member here at Network, we have been talking about what would a lobby day look like for our members. So all of those issues are definitely things that we're thinking about and we're hoping to talk with you about soon. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we have a few questions for Simone.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, a question for myself, although I would welcome anybody else's insight. So how do we get our parish pastors to talk about the social gospel in terms of legislation to protect the needy and vulnerable? I wish we had a simple answer. I would hope that, my hope is that, right, I mean, we have Pope Francis. We know that some Not all of our church here in the U.S. is embracing him the way we here at Network are, or some of our brother bishops are. But I would hope that that could set the tone. We have lots of resources here at Network, and a lot of our partners in the Catholic community have resources as well. I would say, just in my experience in doing parish organizing, you know, have one or two, well, go in pairs at least, a small group. Don't overwhelm your pastor. Remember, they're very overwhelmed typically. And just share your concern. I would hope, especially with Amoris Laetitia and just the continual call to be more pastoral, that they would, you know, meet you for coffee and talk about this issue, and maybe work a way together with your parish council or others, your small Christian communities or your social justice committee, to really craft a plan to do this. And we can certainly here at Network, grassroots mobilization, and all of us can certainly help you in this mission and provide you with information and support and prayers. So,
can I add something?
Yeah.
One of the things that is working in my parish is talking with the liturgists and getting some really good social justice things added to the prayers of the faithful.
Great. Yeah, that's a great place to start. Thanks, Marge. And I think, too, thinking about upcoming with Advent, National Migration Week, which starts on the Epiphany, there's a lot of nice pieces that connect with with the Catholic liturgical and some of our Protestant liturgical calendars. That would be a good opportunity to do that as well. All right, we have some larger questions for Simone here. So of course we're lamenting today, but can we also note that there are more women in the Senate than ever before?
Fabulous, and more women of color than ever before. We have our first Latina elected from Nevada, which is fairly historic, and Kamala Harris was elected, an African-American woman was elected from California. So we have some good news, and that is lifting that up. There's other good news, too, out there when we did our deeper dive into what's happening around the country. In Arizona, Arizona, of all places, I was sort of shocked, passed an increase in minimum wage and mandated paid sick leave, which I say, well, if Arizona can do it, hey, the rest of us can have living wages and family-friendly workplaces. And then there's a number of districts which more progressive members got elected to the House. And we're going to be doing more analysis as we go forward, but there is definitely some good news there. But I think one of the harder pieces about the news is that it has increased the polarization as opposed to supporting the middle ground. So building this bridge is going to be challenging no matter what.
So Simone, what would you say the role of fear was in the election results?
Oh, well, we probably all have our own opinions on this. I think probably fear was a dominant theme for many. I know Meg and I were traveling around the country, and we met a lot of folks with economic fear, folks with fear that they would hurt our country, folks were fearful of even voting. We met a number of people in a variety of states saying that they were voting early because they were just afraid there would be violence at the polls on Tuesday. So fear was a definite powerful theme in this. And I think that the anger that we saw often displayed in the campaign was really a reflection of fear. That when we feel threatened, we have a tendency to lash out. It's kind of a primal instinct of fight or flight, and none of us are known too much for our flight. So my hunch is the anger comes with the fear. So hopefully, if we step into community, people don't have to be as frightened. Because I've realized, talking to folks, that if people feel like no one has your back, that you're all alone, then I will fight. But if I feel like somebody's with me, then I'm much more able to be cooperative, engage, and do a deeper analysis of what's going on. So fear was important. Not the end of the story, though.
Oh, Billy from Twitter.
Cool.
I know, our big first here. The difference in the election is that white voters put Trump over the top. How do we talk about race?
Well, how do we talk about race? I think Laura really touched on this in her remarks, but I know one of the things that we're trying here at Network, we've been committed forever to being an anti-racist organization, and we've been wrestling with this. But we've set ourselves a goal for next year of engaging in the dismantling of white privilege. Now, when I say dismantle white privilege, what I've come to know is too often I, as a white person, kind of get crippled by guilt, and I feel bad, and it's just awful. But that is a privilege to be able to have that reaction even, and that rather what we need to do is to work on extending the privilege to everyone. And so I think Laura spoke about the courage of having hard conversations. We need to look, we who walk in white skin need to have the conversation with others about the privilege we have just by the skin we walk in our country. And that is tough because, and maybe our prayer needs to be that we may have eyes to see, because one of the challenges with privilege is half the time I'm not even aware of it. And I think if we're bold enough even to ask the question about privilege and do it without guilt or blame, and do it in a matter of course, then I think we can begin to make progress. I worry that the issue of racism makes the definition about people of color, where the reality is for me at this moment and my insights, it's about white privilege. So we're trying to be bold that way. Maybe that'll help. We'll let you know how our work goes during the coming year, and if you've got ideas, help us out. We need help.
All right. Is this our final question? We have a few more. Okay. Sister Simone, do I have to be hopeful? Do I have to forgive? Can I be angry and sad for a while?
Well, I highly advise that we embrace the feelings that you have. I realized for myself, this morning I was doing my meditation, and it felt to me quite like dealing with death, that there was anger, denial. This morning I had to report on certain states, so I only looked at the states. I didn't look at the overall total because I didn't want to know. And so it was a bit of denial. But in the end, I think that the challenge that we have is acknowledging our feelings, sharing our feelings, and in a contemplative stance, seeing where we're led. I was talking to staff earlier that our anger can be a protection to keep us from being crushed, and yet by the same token, when we no longer need that anger, then we can kind of break open like a walnut shell and move out beyond it. So yeah, stay with what you're feeling, do it. And if some annoying upbeat person tells you just get over it, tell them that you have a right to engage in your own journey and process, because each story is unique. And maybe you could even ask that annoying person, well, how can you be so upbeat? What's going on with you? And find out, then let us know.
Wow, we have some good questions here. I'm going to punt this one over to our GR team, the Lauras. What about DACA? Are recipients at greater risk now than before?
Yeah, it is clear that in terms of campaign rhetoric, the idea of pulling back protections for DACA and DAPA has been discussed. The better way talks about removing executive orders. So I think that the question will be, how do they prioritize issues? I think it's both Marge and Simone have said. And I think, frankly, from our perspective, the faith voice has just become so much more important in any discussion about immigration, because, again, I think we have a way to say it is faithful to welcome immigrants and to try to moderate some of what we may see come. And so my prayer is that they don't move forward, that they get busy with other things. But this was so core in their messaging and in their documents that I'm personally very fearful.
And Ken, this is Simone, and can I just add, Laura, this is one of the challenges of only doing executive action, is when you have an executive, all actions can be changed. I think hue and cry. I think there is the opportunity for us to be involved if they do that. Maybe we could just keep them distracted by a whole bunch of other stuff and let this one fly under the radar. Let us pray to the Lord.
So we do have a question here about climate change and the outcome of this election. Laura, you want to take that one?
Well, again, the great unknown. So we have a candidate who says that climate change is a hoax brought on by our competitors in China. I have no idea where that comes from. We do know, too, that, and it really has been, the faith community has been working with Republican moderate members, most of whom are coming back next year, to try to build some kind of consensus around climate. A lot of that has been masked in discussions regarding alternative energy. If you look where alternative energy is really taking off, surprise, surprise, it's in many of the red states. So a very uphill battle, but maybe a need for a different approach and maybe a need for new partners. But it'll be a lot of work, and it will be an issue, though.
And one of the good things is that the Paris Accords are now fully implemented at a much faster pace than it was ever expected, partially because of the Trump candidacy. So I think this election produced a quick embracing of the Paris Accords, so that's a step forward.
Okay. I think we have 4 more questions here. I'm going to go to a big policy one that I think we're all thinking about what are Network's thoughts on Paul Ryan's poverty proposal.
Oh, yes, and we say yes. The good news is Mr. Ryan is engaged in a concern, or has been engaged in a concern about poverty. Many of you, I'm sure, saw what we put out when we corrected his paper. We only gave him a D+ on his paper and told him he could resubmit it once he had addressed a few other pieces of Catholic social teaching. But I don't know that that's going to continue to be a front and center view for him, because it was front and center partially because of the president's leadership on the issue, and that we pushed. Now, a way that the faith community can be involved is trying to hold him somewhat accountable for that vision. And it is true that he has been seriously impacted by Pope Francis. I mean, he does take his faith seriously. And so Pope Francis's approach with those at the margins has made a difference to him. Whether it will continue to make a difference in a new administration, I don't know. This is going to be very interesting. And whether or not Mr. Trump stays away from his temptation of punishing those he disagrees with is going to be really, I think, an important piece. So I would not be the least bit surprised to see that there's a new speaker early on in the 115th Congress. Part of me hopes not, because we've learned a way to work with Speaker Ryan in some fashion, and ironically, he may be a moderating voice. So a lot of it's wait and see. We are going to renew our critique of his poverty plan and to see if we can engage him in more conversation.
Great. All right, we have three questions, although I think one we can kind of dovetail together. But this one I think is really interesting. How do we better explain the adverse implications of policies that masquerade as benefiting the poor but really harm them? My initial thought on this is what we do a lot at Network, which is gather stories. You know, when the sisters are on the bus, or even during our election travel this fall, we visited social service agencies and talked to individuals and heard, you know, what was it like to suffer from barriers to employment, or certainly, you know, what is it like to be receiving TANF? What is it like to be undocumented? All of these. So if your church or your faith community or your community group students are volunteering at an agency or doing, engaging in charity work, I think this is an opportunity to do that. Does anyone else want to comment?
Can I just add to that, Meg? One of the reasons we know the power of story is because of our experience of hearing these stories and sharing them, and we've got a lot of material up on our website about it. But the other piece that I want to underscore is that Pope Francis, in Joy of the Gospel, says that if we want to create peace, which I think our nation is in serious need of peace, that the third point, he has 4 points, but the third one is he says realities or stories of real people are more important than theories. And when we do our lobby work, I've found it extremely effective to tell a story and say to the legislator or the staff, they're suffering because of this policy. And you tell the story, and then you wait. It's not our job to have to solve it. It's our job to have to protect the people. And so if we can break their hearts, I say, break their hearts rather than their heads, because I think we will get a lot further. But it's making them do the work to figure it out. But once we've broken their hearts, then they're engaged in the question or the pursuit.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of final 2 questions here. How can we use this election as a way to get more people to join us? This is a great organizing question. And I think it really is that holy curiosity of, and wait a couple of days maybe, and as you're seeing people in your community, ask them about how they're feeling. See what their self-interest is in this election. Maybe they are really upset about one aspect of the outcome, whether it's with the president or maybe a Senate race or a ballot initiative that passed. We really need to start going back to having those one-on-one conversations and and understanding what people care about. Of course, the joy of Network is we have at least seven different policy issues that we can work on and that we're working on. And so I think that there's a place at the table for everyone to take action and not feel hopeless. Did anyone else on our team want to add to that?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Simone is going to lead us, close us out here with a poem.
Well, I thought as we were ending, I thought maybe a poem could be helpful. And it's one of my poems that I wrote in 2002 when I went to Iraq, and we were driving back and we got caught in a sandstorm. That was terrifying because we couldn't see the road but had to keep driving at regular speed so we wouldn't get killed because everybody kept driving at regular speed. And then finally, I don't know, it was 25 hours or 25 minutes, I have no idea how long, but we finally came to about a 10-inch band of rain, and in an instant we were out into desert clear. it was crystal clear and we could look back and see the sandstorm. And later I learned that wild camels in the desert run towards sandstorms because they know the trailing edge has the water that they look for. But anyway, this was my poem that I really think for me fits now, and it's called Compassion's Path. We walk a sandstorm of impotence, isolated dread, the demons of our day. We walk a sandstorm of half-truths, lies of ochre, beige, tan, sepia confusion, pelted, buffeted by winds of war. We walk a sandstorm of drifting elusive truth, wandering waves, and blind following. We walk a sandstorm eroded by demanding doubt, overwhelmed by the horror swirling round, invading lungs and lives. We walk a sandstorm of promised grief, aching temptation to hunker down and hide until a more propitious time. But in this time of alluring weakness, in this time of fearful groaning, cold, blind logic, anger rising, remember the clear-eyed anchor of our resolve. Remember the eyes of Mayada, Sarah, Rita, Hassan, Abdullah, Makbula, and many more. We may be blinded in the outward journey, but remember this inner core. May the eyes of family, terrors of family, set fire to our impotence, stoke our resolve, melt the cold stone of our hearts to yield to tears. For like rain, tears shed settle sandstorms. Like rain, tears shed clear the air. Like rain, tears shed reveal the path. So let us weep. Let us embody healing tears. Let us be copious tears to settle our country's storm. Thank you for joining us. Let us weep. Let us act. Let us be the people we are called to be. We, the people of the United States. Thank you for being a part of us.
Amen.